Cliff Richard, now 85, has finally opened up about the truth of his long and quietly meaningful connection with George Harrison, a relationship built on mutual respect rather than the spotlight, and shaped by two men who helped change British music forever. Cliff, born Harry Roger Webb on October 14, 1940 in Lucknow, India, rose from humble post-war beginnings after his family returned to England in 1948, growing up in modest circumstances in Cheshunt, Hertfordshire, where he fell in love with American rock and roll, especially the electrifying sounds of Elvis Presley and Little Richard. That early passion ignited the spark that transformed him from an ordinary teenager into one of Britain's most enduring musical icons long before the Beatles arrived. By 1958, with the release of Move It, Cliff Richard shocked British audiences with what many now call the first true British rock and roll record. His band, originally the Drifters but soon renamed the Shadows, helped launch a musical revolution. Their collaborations brought hits like Living Doll, Please Don't Tease, Travelin' Light, and The Young Ones, songs that defined an era and made Cliff the UK's first bona fide rock and roll star. As the 1960s progressed and the Beatles began their meteoric rise, Cliff managed something nearly impossible, staying relevant even as music was transformed around him. His clean-cut image, flexible voice, and openness to change helped him shift from rock to ballads, pop, gospel, and later adult contemporary styles. Despite the industry's constant evolution, Cliff never relied on shock value or scandal. His artistic reinvention, coupled with his Christian faith, guided him through the decades, earning him widespread admiration and keeping his reputation untarnished. Through the 1970s and 1980s, he enjoyed renewed success with hits like Devil Woman, Dreaming, and We Don't Talk Anymore. Showing the world that he was far more than a star from the past, he was an artist who could thrive in any era, with more than 250 million records sold and the extraordinary achievement of having a top 5 UK hit in every decade from the 1950s to the 2010s. Cliff Richard became one of the most successful musicians in history, earning a knighthood in 1995 and numerous awards across his career. His later work, including the fabulous Rock and Roll Songbook in 2013, Just Fabulous Rock and Roll in 2016, Rise Up in 2018, Music, The Air That I Breathe in 2020, and Christmas with Cliff in 2022, continued to chart strongly, proving his timeless appeal. Yet, behind all the accolades and endless reinvention, Cliff has always been a private man, avoiding gossip and guarding his personal life carefully, choosing companionship, faith, and music over marriage or public drama. And it is only now, at 85, that he has decided to reflect openly on his quiet, deeply human friendship with George Harrison, a relationship many fans never knew existed in such depth. Cliff recalls their first meeting in the early 1960s, long before George became a global icon. He was incredibly shy, Cliff said, but there was this warmth about him that felt sincere. While Cliff was already a national star, thanks to the Shadows, George was still finding his footing as the Beatles' youngest and most reserved member. The two men might have seemed an unlikely match, Cliff the polished performer, George the introspective guitarist, yet their bond grew from a shared search for meaning and authenticity. George was one of the most quietly spiritual people I've ever known, Cliff revealed, explaining how their conversations often wandered toward faith, purpose, and inner peace. Cliff spoke from a Christian perspective, while George explored Hinduism and Eastern philosophy. We were coming from different worlds, Cliff said gently, but we were asking the same questions. In one conversation Cliff cherishes even now, George told him, All paths lead to the same place if your heart is right. A line Cliff says he has carried with him for decades. Though they lived vastly different lives, George consumed by Beatlemania, and Cliff navigating a solo career with unwavering discipline. They always felt a mutual understanding. Cliff admired George's ability to step away from fame, to retreat into his garden, his home, or his music without needing the constant applause of the world. He remembered one intimate moment at a small gathering where George quietly played the sitar in the corner of a room. "It wasn't a performance," Cliff said softly. "It was emotion coming through the strings. You could feel his soul in every note." Cliff even admitted that George's spiritual approach influenced his own musical choices, encouraging him to record songs with deeper personal meaning. When George died in 2001, Cliff felt an unexpected heaviness, a grief that surprised him with its strength. "We weren't close in the way people imagine friends to be, seeing each other all the time, but he had a lasting presence in my life," Cliff reflected. "I admired him, not just for what he achieved, but for who he was." Today, Cliff looks back and sees George Harrison as a reminder of humility, peace, and inner strength, qualities he believes are fading from the modern music world. In his twilight years, reflecting on his own incredible journey, Cliff speaks of George not as a Beatle or a legend, but as a quiet soul searching for meaning. Just as he was, "We were two very different men walking the same road," Cliff said, his voice trembling slightly. "And I'll always be grateful that our paths crossed, even for a little while."